The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Ridge. The birds sang softly in the distance, dew clung to every blade of grass, and the stillness of the morning hinted at a peaceful day ahead. But beneath the surface, tensions brewed. The HOA president, Margaret Jensen, or as the locals referred to her, HOA Karen, had made it her life's mission to control every inch of the neighborhood. Her watchful eyes monitored every blade of grass that grew too tall, every car parked slightly askew, and every visitor who dared linger too long. For months, I had watched her operate with an iron fist, imposing fines on my neighbors for trivial infractions, sending passive-aggressive emails, and attending every town hall meeting to ensure her voice was the loudest. But today, the tables were about to turn. Today, I was no longer the quiet observer. Today, I was the owner of the property she was about to make a scene over. I had been eyeing the vacant lot on the edge of Maplewood Ridge for months. The property had fallen into legal limbo after the previous owner passed away, and after extensive research and a fair bit of negotiation with the estate, I had finally closed the deal 30 minutes earlier. With the paperwork freshly signed and the deed officially recorded, the land was now mine. The real estate agent had even handed me the keys and congratulated me as I sipped my morning coffee. As I stepped onto my newly acquired property, I breathed in the fresh morning air and looked around at the overgrown shrubs and the remnants of an old wooden shed. This lot, though currently neglected, held immense potential. My plan was simple: build a private retreat, free from HOA overreach, and enjoy the serenity that only a space truly my own could provide. Unbeknownst to me, Margaret had already spotted me from her kitchen window. Her hawk-like gaze zeroed in on my presence, and her fingers flew across her smartphone as she dialed the local police. Her voice, shrill and authoritative, echoed through her kitchen as she demanded immediate action. "Yes, officer, there's a trespasser on lot 43. He has no right to be there. I need someone here immediately. He's violating HOA rules and could be dangerous," she declared, her voice dripping with urgency and self-righteousness. With the call made, Margaret threw on her signature red blazer, the symbol of her self-appointed authority, and stormed out of her house. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she marched towards my property, her expression twisted into a mixture of indignation and smug satisfaction. "Excuse me," she barked as she reached the edge of the lot. "What do you think you're doing here? This is private property, and you're trespassing. The police are on their way." I turned slowly, meeting her glare with a calm smile. "Good morning, Margaret. Lovely day, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me. You have no business here. This lot is under HOA jurisdiction and you're violating our regulations." I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the freshly signed deed, and handed it to her. "Actually, Margaret, this property is no longer under HOA jurisdiction. I purchased it this morning. Here's the deed, fully notarized and recorded." Margaret snatched the papers from my hand, scanning them furiously. Her face paled as the reality of the situation set in. This must be a mistake. This property was supposed to be part of our expansion plans." "Not anymore," I replied calmly. "I'm afraid your expansion plans will have to be reconsidered." Before she could muster a response, the flashing lights of a patrol car appeared at the end of the street. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions neutral as they approached. "Morning, folks," one officer greeted. "We received a call about a trespasser. Can someone explain what's going on?" Margaret stepped forward, waving the deed in the air. "Officer, this man is trespassing on HOA property. I demand he be removed immediately." The officer turned to me, his brow raised. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" I nodded and produced a second copy of the deed, handing it over. The officer examined it carefully, then consulted his partner. After a brief discussion, they both turned back to Margaret. Ma'am, according to this documentation, he is the legal owner of this property. There's no trespassing here, the officer stated firmly. Margaret's face contorted with frustration. But this was supposed to be HOA land. Our bylaws don't override property ownership, the officer interrupted. If you have a legal dispute, you'll need to take it to civil court. For now, there's no crime being committed. With that, the officers tipped their hats and returned to their patrol car, leaving Margaret standing there, fuming and speechless. I couldn't help but chuckle softly. Margaret, perhaps next time you should verify your information before calling the police, I said gently. Have a nice day. As I walked further onto my property, inspecting the work that lay ahead, I could feel Margaret's burning gaze following me. This was only the beginning, and I knew she wouldn't give up so easily. The HOA had lost its first battle, but the war was far from over. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of clearing the land. Contractors arrived with heavy machinery, tearing down the decaying shed and removing overgrown brush. I installed a temporary fence to mark the boundaries, and surveyors confirmed every inch of the property lines. My vision was slowly taking shape, and with every passing day, the lot transformed from an eyesore into a budding oasis. But Margaret wasn't idle. She rallied the HOA board, leveraging every rule and regulation she could find to try and halt my progress. Noise complaints, permit disputes, environmental concerns, every conceivable obstacle was thrown my way. Each morning, I was greeted by a new violation notice taped to the temporary fence, signed with Margaret's unmistakable flourish. Despite the relentless harassment, my legal team was prepared. Every permit was filed correctly, every inspection passed without issue, and every complaint was swiftly addressed and dismissed. Margaret's frustration grew with each failed attempt to derail my project. The situation reached a boiling point during a heated HOA meeting. Margaret stood at the podium, her voice filled with venom as she addressed the assembled homeowners. "This individual is undermining the integrity of our community," she declared. "His unauthorized construction threatens our property values and sets a dangerous precedent. We must act to preserve the standards we have worked so hard to maintain." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but not all were in agreement. Many homeowners had grown weary of Margaret's overbearing leadership and saw my development as a welcome improvement. I stood to address the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, I respect your community and its values. My project complies with all local laws and regulations. This land was never part of the HOA, and my ownership is fully legal. I invite any of you to visit the site and see the positive changes firsthand." Several homeowners nodded, and a few even approached me afterward to express their support. The tide was beginning to turn, and Margaret sensed her grip slipping. In a last-ditch effort, Margaret filed a lawsuit, claiming that the property had been wrongfully sold and seeking to invalidate my ownership. The case garnered media attention, drawing cameras and reporters to our quiet neighborhood. Headlines read, "HOA Power Struggle, Homeowner versus HOA President." The courtroom battle was intense. Margaret's attorneys argued that the property had been earmarked for community expansion and that its sale violated HOA plans. My legal team countered with ironclad evidence: the estate's clear title, the absence of any HOA claim on the lot, and the legally binding nature of my purchase. After weeks of testimony, document reviews, and heated arguments, the judge rendered his decision. The court finds that the plaintiff's claims are without merit. The defendant's ownership of the property is legal and binding. The lawsuit is hereby dismissed. Margaret's face was a mask of defeat as the gavel fell. The courtroom erupted in whispers and murmurs as the media captured every moment. I shook my attorney's hand, grateful for their diligence and expertise. As I left the courthouse, reporters swarmed me with questions. "How does it feel to win against the HOA?" one asked. I smiled. "It feels like justice. Property rights matter, and no one should be bullied by overzealous organizations." The victory was sweet, But I knew Margaret wouldn't disappear quietly. She retreated into the shadows, her influence diminished but not entirely extinguished. For now, though, I could focus on completing my retreat, free from her interference. The cabin rose steadily over the following months, a testament to resilience and determination. Surrounded by lush greenery and overlooking a serene pond, it became a haven not just for me, but for friends and family who sought refuge from the chaos of everyday life. As the final nail was hammered and the last coat of paint dried, I stood on the porch and took in the view. The battle had been hard fought, but the reward was worth every sleepless night and legal hurdle. This was my sanctuary, my piece of freedom carved out from beneath the iron grip of the HOA. Little did I know, however, that Margaret's final act of desperation was still to come, and it would test my resolve like never before. The days following my courtroom victory brought a calm I hadn't felt in months. The land was legally mine, the cabin stood tall and sturdy, and most of the HOA members had either accepted defeat or grown tired of Margaret's relentless crusade. But despite her public humiliation, Margaret was far from finished. She had always been resourceful, and in her mind, there was still one card left to play. I underestimated how deep her obsession ran. It began subtly at first. Anonymous complaints to the zoning board suggested that my cabin encroached on protected wetlands. Environmental activists started visiting, citing violations that didn't exist. Inspectors arrived unannounced, combing through every detail of my property, searching for the smallest infraction they could pin on me. But each time, my permits and inspections were in perfect order. My contractors had done everything by the book, and I had spared no expense to ensure complete compliance with the law. Margaret's next move was bolder. She filed a petition with the county council to have my property rezoned, arguing that it was crucial for community development and environmental preservation. At the council meeting, she spoke passionately, painting me as a selfish outsider threatening the harmony of Maplewood Ridge. "Ladies and gentlemen of the council," she began, her voice trembling with faux sincerity, "this man has constructed a monstrosity that not only disrupts the natural beauty of our community, but endangers local wildlife and undermines our shared values. We must act in the interest of all residents." I stood to respond, my voice calm and measured. "Members of the council, I respect the concerns raised, but they are baseless. Every step of my development has complied with state, county, and municipal regulations. This is a private property matter, not an HOA jurisdiction. The facts are clear. The council deliberated for hours, but ultimately sided with the law. They rejected Margaret's petition, acknowledging that her arguments lacked merit. Another defeat for her, but still she pressed on. Margaret's obsession soon took a darker turn. I began noticing unfamiliar vehicles parked near my property at odd hours. Drones buzzed overhead, attempting to capture footage. My mail was tampered with, and my contractors received anonymous threats urging them to abandon the project. It was clear that someone, likely Margaret or her loyalists, was orchestrating a campaign of intimidation. I installed additional security cameras and hired private security to monitor the property. My attorney advised me to document every incident, meticulously, building a case for potential criminal charges. The local police opened an investigation, but without direct evidence linking Margaret to the harassment, progress was slow. Despite the escalating pressure, I refused to back down. My cabin represented more than just a piece of land. It symbolized the right to stand against bullying and corruption. Friends, family, and even former HOA members who had grown disillusioned with Margaret's tyranny offered their support. Then came the final act of desperation. One stormy night, as heavy rain pounded the earth and lightning illuminated the sky, I received an urgent call from my security team. They had apprehended 2 individuals attempting to sabotage my property by cutting power lines and damaging the water system. I rushed to the scene, heart pounding. The police arrived moments later, taking the perpetrators into custody. Under Salakerko. Questioning, one of them broke down and confessed. Margaret had offered them money to disable my utilities, hoping to create hazardous conditions that would force county intervention and an eventual condemnation of my cabin. With this damning confession, the authorities finally had the evidence they needed. Margaret was arrested and charged with multiple counts of conspiracy, vandalism, and harassment. The news spread like wildfire, drawing statewide attention. The once powerful HOA president was now facing serious jail time. The trial was swift and decisive. Witnesses testified about Margaret's relentless campaign against me and her misuse of HOA funds to fuel her vendetta. The jury found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to several years in prison, and the judge ordered restitution for the damages and legal fees I had incurred. With Margaret's downfall complete, Maplewood Ridge underwent a transformation. The HOA board was restructured, adopting transparent policies and electing new leadership committed to fairness and community well-being. Many residents expressed relief and gratitude, recognizing how toxic the environment had become under Margaret's rule. I finally settled into the peace I had long sought. My cabin became a cherished retreat, a symbol of resilience and justice. Friends visited often, and we would sit on the porch, sharing stories while gazing at the serene landscape. The battle had been grueling, but it had forged bonds and strengthened the community in unexpected ways. However, the shadows of the past still lingered for some time. Margaret's loyalists, though leaderless, occasionally tried to stir unrest. Flyers with false accusations about me appeared on community boards, and petty vandalism targeted my mailbox and driveway signs. Each incident was minor but served as a bitter reminder of how far some people would go to cling to their twisted version of control. To counter these efforts, the new HOA leadership worked closely with law enforcement and the district attorney's office, ensuring that any attempts at sabotage were swiftly dealt with. Several of Margaret's former associates faced their own legal consequences for their roles in the conspiracy, and slowly, the fear that had gripped Maplewood Ridge for years began to dissipate. As the seasons changed, so did the atmosphere in the neighborhood. New families moved in, drawn by the community's newfound transparency and neighborly spirit. Block parties, cleanup events, and town hall meetings replaced the secretive backroom dealings that once defined the HOA. People felt heard and valued, and I was humbled when many of them sought my input on various community projects. One day, while attending a community gathering near the lake, I was approached by Ellen, the new HOA president. Her warm smile and genuine concern for the residents had earned her widespread respect. "We couldn't have turned things around without your resilience," she said, handing me a plaque of appreciation from the HOA members. "You stood up when no one else could, and for that, we are forever grateful." I accepted the plaque with a nod, my heart swelling with pride and relief. I only did what anyone should do when faced with injustice. We protect what matters to us. The years that followed saw Maplewood Ridge blossom into a model of fair governance and community cooperation. The scandal became a cautionary tale that spread beyond our town, inspiring new state legislation to place strict limits on HOA powers. The so-called Maplewood Act introduced mandatory oversight, public audits, and clearer avenues for residents to challenge overreaching boards. Meanwhile, my cabin evolved into a symbol not just of personal victory, but of collective healing. Schools brought students to tour the property as part of civic education programs, learning about property rights, due process, and civic responsibility. Local journalists frequently referenced the HOA Battle of Maplewood Ridge in discussions about grassroots justice. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves painted the hills in fiery shades of red and gold, I stood on my porch, sipping a mug of hot cider, feeling the cool breeze carry away the final remnants of past troubles. My family gathered around for our annual harvest celebration, laughter filling the air, the cabin's walls echoing with stories of perseverance and triumph. In a final twist of irony, the old HOA clubhouse, which Margaret once used as her command center, had been transferred to public ownership and converted into a community center. Inside, photographs and exhibits told the story of the legal battle, reminding future generations of what unchecked power could do and how determined citizens could rise to defeat it. As night fell and the stars sparkled above the calm lake, I took a deep breath, knowing that peace wasn't given, it was earned. And together, as a community, we had earned it. The once toxic HOA was no more. Margaret's reign was a distant memory, and Maplewood Ridge stood tall, free, fair, and thriving once again.